Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats, coming to you as always from here in the podcasting studios of Czech Television, one of our chamber champions. I would like, as always, to acknowledge that I live and work in the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking nations known to us as Songhees and Kosapsum. And all of this is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union who are changing what banking can do for people, for community, and for the planet. So in the news these days, in the issues, in conversations, cost of living is always top of mind for people. Housing is associated with that, and other construction projects are associated with that. And all through the recovery period from the pandemic, and actually during the pandemic itself, we saw most of that work continue. There were slowdowns because of a raise in interest rates, but nonetheless, we are focusing still on the creating of housing right now, renovations in housing to make room for stay-at-home working people. And anyway, just the whole idea of development and construction is what we're going to talk about today with a couple of people who have been with us before on Chamber Chats. Kathy Whitcher is here. She is the Executive Director of UDI, the Urban Development Institute. Kathy, how are you?
Very well, Bruce. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being back. And Rory Kulmala is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Construction Association, or VICA. And Rory, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thanks for coming back. So for both of you, same question. Kathy, I'll begin with you. When you meet someone for the first time, how do you explain UDI to them and what you do?
So we are an advocate for the development industry. We, work with all levels of government to facilitate for collaboration, provide education, encourage best practices, and just advocate for balanced policies and challenges that we're facing in the industry, which is often and many.
And Rory, the name of your organization seems somewhat self-explanatory, the Vancouver Island Construction Association, but if you could frame up a little bit of an explanation of what your organization does.
Well, similar to what Kathy does, I actually take a little bit of a play out of your book. I say we're the Chamber of Commerce for the construction sector. You know, we are there to advocate, to educate, to kind of focus on that part of our economy and help them do better, or just get them through troubling times. Certainly, it seems that's what we've been doing a lot lately.
Something we love to see. I think your dog just walked behind you there. Can we just say hello to the dog really briefly?
That might have been the cat.
Oh, okay.
The dog usually chases after, but I'll try to make sure there's two cats. You'll see one dog, and
okay.
Hopefully they don't get too crazy back there.
That's kind of a chamber rule that if there's a pet in the room during a call, we kind of like to acknowledge them and meet them. But thank you. Okay. So, Kathy, I'll ask you this first. How much do your two organizations work together? Because you do kind of dovetail on what each other does, right?
Yeah, actually, we've created quite a good collaboration bond between the two of us, and including the CHBA, the Canadian Home Builders. And last June, we actually did our inaugural awards gala, the VIBI Awards. And it was very successful. So we're doing it again this year on May 30th. And Rory, you might want to chime in about that.
Yeah, Rory, go for it.
Yeah, it's another opportunity. We collaborate all the time, where we're certainly looking at issues. We have similar issues. We have similar causes. The developers don't get anything done without the contractors, and the contractors don't have jobs without the developers. So there's a certain level of collaboration that we have to do. We have our awards, for instance. We bring our industry together, both developers and builders, and with the home builders, to really showcase what we do. And we can't do that in silos.
You're right. It was a cat, and it just went by again. So maybe we'll meet the cat later. Okay. So we chatted during the pandemic too, Kathy. We talked about the fact that you were considered to be an essential service, but there were some things that came along and slowed down progress during the pandemic too. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, supply chain was probably one of the major ones. The employment, people just getting people from trades, that was very difficult. And I think, we may talk about it later, but just the fact that Victoria, or the capital region, is a very expensive place to live. So, even though trades now, they make pretty good money, it's really hard drawing them here and getting them to stay here. It's just expensive.
Yeah, and Rory, for your members, it was a matter of getting plywood, getting cement, getting moving parts into their hands, right?
Well, for the longest time, it was just getting back to work. You have to remember the restrictions with 6 foot apart. There was a lot of imposed criteria that the construction economy had to adapt very quickly. No longer could we put 5 or 6 tradespeople in a room to do work. It could have been one. So that protracted construction times, supplies got they got dried up. And the challenge was this was a global crisis. So it's not like we can pull from the east or pull from the south or pull from another place. We're all facing the same challenges, which made supply chain all but grind to a halt.
And there was even things like they had to put hand washing stations in place at construction sites, and in cold weather, that can be a bit of an issue, right?
Yeah, well, and we've had those things for years. We have washrooms, but where you're having, um, you know, where you're having this rigor in, and I'm not judging what was said to be done, but the fact that we were able to do it slows down the process, where you have to create traffic schematics in a site. You can go up these stairs. You can't cross in a hall. You can come down other stairs. So it really created an operational challenge to move goods and to move people on a construction site and have any sort of resemblance of productivity.
I do, if I can just
Yeah.
chime in, I do want to add though, I think that our industry did an amazing job in keeping the wheel going. And yeah, we didn't stop, and
No,
we just adapted to all these things that
yeah,
we were made to install. And I think we did a great job.
sorry. Well, and that was what we found. Oh, there you got your
There's
background.
the dog. Beautiful.
There's
Okay.
the dog. There was that is really, Kathy, thanks for pointing that out. We were able to resume construction activity from the time the shutdown was happening and called to when, we maybe had 2 or 3 weeks of zero productivity. However, where you think of restaurants had upwards of, 6, 8 weeks before they could reopen, we were really 2, 3 weeks by the time we said, okay, we'll do this. And we constantly improved so that we could keep working.
Yeah.
And we're one of the few sectors that really managed to keep going through through COVID.
Yeah, and we're all very thankful for how strong and robust your sectors have stayed, that's for sure. So you've both brought up the idea of supply chain, which brings us to you know what from you know where by you know who, and that would be the tariffs. Kathy, how much are you hearing about the whole tariff thing every day?
Yeah, a lot. And it really stems from the fact, well, it goes back to the COVID days when costs just started skyrocketing, and, labor costs went up, land costs were already going up. This now is going to add another layer of cost, which at this point in time is going to be detrimental to the industry. I honestly, I don't think anybody really knows. Like, we don't have that crystal ball, but I think it might just be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
And what does that look like, do you think?
I think that some projects may be put on hold. It's just that layer of cost. We've had cost come from every level of government in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years. It's just cost after cost after cost of layering on, whether it's, the step code, the zero carbon step code, and then municipal fees of DCCs and so on. And it's just got to stop somewhere. And I think it really, there needs to be a breaking point for them to understand that development just can't go on anymore. It just will not pencil out.
Yeah, and there will be, of course, comments about that from the construction side too. And we're going to talk about that next. Our guests on Chamber Chat today are Kathy Whitcher, who is the Executive Director of the Urban Development Institute, and Rory Kulmala is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Construction Association. So, Rory, over to you. The T word, the tariff thing, what's that going to look like in your world?
Uncertainty. It is input. It's throwing a literal grenade in our sector that, one, we don't know how it's going to affect, truly how it's going to affect. You can say 25% tariff increases, but as we've just heard about the aluminum and steel tariffs, they're going to layer further tariffs on top of that. what it means for us now is we don't know what we're supposed to do as far as bidding. We have our friends in the development sector that have projects. They're going to want to actively put those out for tender. And as a contract, even as an owner, when we do budgeting, you're going to look at it and go, can I afford to throw 25% a premium on the material part of a contract, which could be anywhere from 40 to 60%. So from a contractor's perspective, we don't know how to price work to manage that risk in the absence of having a contract language in that says, you can treat tariffs a certain way. But then again, it will impose certain restrictions on pricing that's going to basically say, how do we manage this risk? How do we have a lens forward to say, what does affordability, like as Kathy says, affordability now is stressed. This is going to take unaffordability to a whole new level if we're not able to mitigate, if we're not able to predict. We can perhaps look at what will these impacts have across our entire supply chain. It's really important that we know that, and given the fluidity, I'm going to say, or this just spur of the moment decisions that come out of the US, we just don't know. And that's what's causing us to be a little bit skittish to say, if I had to think in a worst case scenario, we're going to plan for not just 25%, but depending on the product and how that product might move back and forth, it could be 40, 50% at the end of the day by the time you're done. Who wants to pay for that?
Yeah. Just for perspective, the day this is being recorded is February 12th. So it could be by the time that folks are watching or hearing this, the situation may be a little bit altered from that. But just for perspective, this is happening on the 12th of February. So Kathy, I'll go back to you for this. What do you think are alternatives to the supply chain between Canada and the U.S.? Where else can people be looking?
Yeah, well, we've got to break down the interprovincial barriers, and Canada I'm hoping that this is a wake-up call for Canada, that we stop sending all our raw materials down south or wherever else we send it, and that we start manufacturing more in Canada, create the jobs that we lose for sending our raw material, and then having to buy the manufactured material back at exorbitant rates. So I just think that we need to look more at our provinces, our neighbors.
Yeah, interprovincial barriers. Again, Rory, that's on your organization's radar every day, right?
Yeah. We've got a great economy here when we look at what our capacity for British Columbia from a raw material point of view. Where we have the challenge is when we have to move our raw materials out to get processed and then brought back into the country. We still have capacity, but gosh, we're going to be looking at, to build capacity just to meet these demands. We've spent an entire generation of devolving our manufacturing sector and moving it around to the US. We've moved it overseas. We're finding ways to get the best value out of these things. And to pull it all back is great, but it's going to take time. We can't just say we are going to now be a manufacturer. We have to build capacity again. We have to build demand. We have to see what the shifts from competitive nations like China would be, or Europe, even South America. We've got friends out there, and I think we've got to band together to demonstrate that we have resiliency from a supply and demand perspective, to show the US that you're not all about what you are, and understanding that what our resources are, whether it's raw materials, whether it's lumber. I'm hearing a ton of, we see what happened in California, and, their plea is we need wood, and we've got it. But the way it's going to work now is we may not send it down there because we need it here, for one, not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But two is the free market is now completely disrupted. The value that we're putting on our products is completely disrupted. So it's going to change the economics in my mind, and it's going to make it more challenging to get anything.
Yeah, Kathy, as you mentioned, the interprovincial boundaries are one thing. Is there any feasibility in looking at other, Rory had mentioned China, for example, other markets in the world, South America, as you mentioned, but does that just add time and cost, and it's kind of a break even on whatever would happen with the tariffs, Kathy? Is that the case?
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's really the biggest problem there, is that the States have been our biggest trade partners because they're so close. But, you know, if we reach out to other countries like China, Japan, or, you know, Europe or whatever, yeah, we've got that shipping cost. So it again, is going to add cost to everything.
Yeah. Time is money, as we all know.
Yeah.
Speaking of money, there's that whole interest rate thing. We're going to talk about that next. We're talking construction and development today on Chamber Chats with Kathy Whitcher, who is the executive director of the UDI, sorry, the UDI organization, the developers organization, and Rory Kulmala is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Construction Association. So, Kathy, the developers are the ones that are putting up the money to make the projects happen, which the builders then come in and build. That all slowed down because of the interest rates. Where are we at now?
Yeah. So the interest rates coming down definitely has helped. But as we've talked about in our previous conversation today, costs are going up on materials and so on. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, one takes a couple steps forward, you take a couple steps back, and so on. So yeah, financing projects definitely got harder with the interest rates, but has helped. It also has helped, the interest rates coming down has also helped with pre-sales and sales of built product. But because of what is going on down south, it now brings, like Rory said, uncertainty. And so this uncertainty has really kind of stopped people in their tracks and starting to, again, reassess what's going to happen.
Yeah. UDI is Urban Development Institute. I apologize for the brain freeze a couple of minutes ago there. Rory, yeah, the same thing. Interest rates are impacting cost of living. It's what your members are paying their members, what they're paying to live. Where's that at with the lower interest rates now?
Well, I think it is making mortgages more accessible, or at least I would hope. I'm looking to Kathy on this. I want those developers to not get hindered by the cost of money and that they move their projects forward. They're building their case on, revenues and how much they can borrow and the cost of that borrowing. We just want them to keep going. We want a market that's competitive, and we want a market that's accessible. And having good interest rates keeps investment going forward, and I think that's going to be critical.
I mean, there's residential stuff being done, commercial, industrial is being built. The province has imposed housing targets, Kathy, on just about every municipality in British Columbia. But the permitting process gets in the way very often of your members being able to say, okay, can I get a permit for this or not? That length of time can be just very unwieldy and unrealistic, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it really does vary right across the capital region here. Some municipalities are better than others, and yeah, they really do. They get in their own way, but they just don't seem to understand that when they increase DCCs, the development cost charges, it adds more cost to the building, and in the end, it's really does your project pencil out? Will you be able to get financing from the bank for it? And so yeah, they need to look at how they're distributing or working on their bylaws to figure out, is this going to hurt the industry? And we try and work with the municipalities to help them, educate them to understand what it is that gives the stumbling blocks. Some of them do listen, and that's great.
Yeah. So, Rory, in that circumstance, most of the builders are waiting around working with a developer who's waiting for a permit. And if they can't get the permit in time, those workers have to move along and the construction companies move along to something else, or they have to lay them off if they have no work, right?
Yeah, right now they move along. If you lose your spot in the queue, it's not being delayed in your permit for a month or two. That could mean you're delaying construction for 6 months because the contractor is holding a spot for them, and losing that, they're going to get onto another project and their capacity is now limited. So it's a bit of a house of cards if you're not careful on keeping the inertia in the industry going, keeping development approvals moving forward. We see it with building permits. They shouldn't be taking an exorbitant long amount of time. And we should be seeing municipalities work with the development and the construction sectors to make sure that they are doing everything they can to move these forward faster and not throw up a barrier.
Another thing that's going to be a factor, we're going to get to some positive stuff in a minute, trust me, but another thing that's a factor right now is that post-secondaries are going to be losing their ability to turn out graduates at the rate that they have in the past. Much of the funding for programs comes from international students, and the number of visas has been reduced. So, Rory, I'll stick with you for this. Your members are looking for tradespeople to come and work for them, but it looks like fewer of them are going to graduate. What's that going to do?
Well, I would caution that relationship in a sense that there are a lot of the trades programs are populated with domestic students. They're coming from the community, they're coming from the province, they're coming from the nation. There's not that many, if any, and I wouldn't have the stats, but my sense is that there's not a lot of Asians coming over to join the carpentry program. What it does do, though, is the school funding formulas are predicated on that revenue and then dispersing it through the school.
Correct.
I know that the schools are cutting programs because they said, well, we've got to cut somewhere, so we're going to take a little bit off the trades programs. We're going to, not run these segments for the trades programs. We've heard of, women in construction, specialty programs for women in construction has been cut back because of funding. School funding, not program funding, even though it's one of the strongest stable programs at a trade, at a post-secondary are the trades programs. It's their business model that says, well, if we don't have that international income, we can't necessarily do these programs at what we thought we could do.
Yeah, and it's across the board. We've seen it Vancouver Island University, for example, has cut its music program, which was one of the most significant in Canada. Diana Krall, I rest my case, but that's But it's the international students that provide the revenue that have allowed them to work forward the way they have. And you mentioned specific programs for women, Rory. Kathy, tell me about what UDI is doing specifically directed toward women workforce.
So we have a Women of UDI, and it's a designed to connect women in the industry, in an industry that is predominantly male.
Mm-hmm.
So we just create these connections, networking, some educational aspects, and just help them to learn and to have some fun as well.
And that's an upside thing. Thank you both for your time today and for all you're doing within your organizations. Rory Kulmala is the CEO of the Vancouver Island Construction Association. Take care of your cold and the dog.
I will.
Thank you. And Kathy Whitcher is the Executive Director of UDI, the Urban Development Institute. Kathy, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bruce, for having me.
And there's one quick final farewell from the cat there in Rory's shot. Thank
you
all.
Go.
I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.